The 10 best facts about the Battle of Gideon with only 300 men. In the pages of history, some battles stand out not only for their military strategy but for the awe they inspire. How is it possible that 300 men not only faced but triumphed against an overwhelmingly superior army? This enigma has fascinated historians and strategists alike. Today, we invite you to dive into a journey through time to discover the 10 most astonishing facts about this epic confrontation. Number 10. The reaction of the Midianites. The reaction of the Midianites during the battle against Gideon and his 300 men is one of the most intriguing and revealing moments of the biblical story, as narrated in the book of Judges, chapters 6 and 7. In an act of ingenious strategy and unbreakable faith, Gideon followed divine instructions to the letter, dividing his men into 3 companies, each equipped with trumpets and pitchers with torches hidden inside. In the darkness, on the edge of the Midianite camp, the 300 men broke the pitchers, revealed the torches, sounded the trumpets, and shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon." This act was not only a display of faith and obedience but also a tactic of unprecedented psychological warfare. The Midianites, awakened from their sleep and plunged into confusion, were struck by panic. The fear, exacerbated by darkness and surprise, led them to perceive an attack by a much larger army. In their disorder, they began to attack each other, believing they were fighting against the invading enemy. This incident culminated in a miraculous victory for Israel, underscoring the power of faith and divine strategy over strength and numbers. The reaction of the Midianites not only demonstrates the efficacy of psychological warfare tactics but also highlights a profound lesson about human nature and divine providence. In moments of fear and confusion, human perception can be easily manipulated, leading to hasty and self-destructive decisions. This biblical event illustrates how, under divine guidance, even apparent disadvantages can become powerful tools of victory. The defeat of the Midianites by their own hands symbolizes the superiority of divine wisdom and power over human logic and conventional military strategies. Ultimately, this story teaches that trust in God and obedience to His commands can lead to unexpected and miraculous outcomes, challenging our expectations and understanding of power and victory. Number 9. The legacy of Gideon. The legacy of Gideon is one of the most eloquent testimonies to faith and obedience to God within the biblical narrative. After his victory over the Midianites with only 300 men, Gideon emerged not only as a military hero but also as a symbol of trust in divine providence in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. This feat is remembered not merely for tactical ingenuity or human courage but primarily for the palpable demonstration that faith in God's guidance can alter the course of history. Gideon's legacy became a beacon of hope and a source of inspiration for the people of Israel, reaffirming the belief in a God who fights his people's battles and secures their victory, not by the strength of their armies, but by their faith and obedience. The significance of Gideon's legacy transcends the narrative of his military victory and delves into the realms of the spiritual and moral. In moments of doubt or challenge, the story of Gideon serves as a reminder that God often chooses the most unlikely means to accomplish his purposes, revealing his power in human weakness. Gideon's victory with 300 men not only demonstrates God's power to deliver and protect but also underscores the importance of genuine faith and unconditional obedience. Thus, Gideon's legacy inspires believers of all ages to place their trust in God, reminding them that, regardless of adversities or the magnitude of challenges, the final victory rests in the hands of the one who directs the destinies of the universe. Number 8. The impact on Israel's faith. The miraculous victory of Gideon with only 300 men over the Midianites is an episode that goes beyond a mere military feat. It represents a pivotal moment in the history of Israel's faith. This event, narrated in the book of Judges, chapters 6 and 7, not only demonstrates God's power and sovereignty over human circumstances but also revitalizes the people of Israel's trust in their Creator. In a period of history when Israel was facing oppression and despair under the yoke of the Midianites, the divine intervention through Gideon and his tiny army served as a powerful reminder that, under the guidance and protection of God, no oppressive force is invincible. The impact of this victory on Israel's faith was profound and multifaceted. First, it re-established the belief in the active and saving presence of God among his people, reaffirming his commitment to liberate Israel from its enemies. Second, this episode served to teach Israel a vital lesson about divine dependence. That victory in life is not achieved by strength, number, or human strategy, but by faith and obedience to God's will. By working through a small group of faithful men, God demonstrated that his power does not require large armies to manifest, but rather hearts willing to trust and act according to his word. This rebirth of faith among Israel not only strengthened their relationship with God but also marked a turning point in their history, inspiring future generations to seek God in times of crisis. Number 7. The importance of vigilance. In the fascinating biblical narrative of Gideon's battle, we find a profound emphasis on the importance of vigilance, especially highlighted in the divine selection process of the 300 warriors. This episode, recounted in the book of Judges, chapters 6 and 7, underscores how God instructed Gideon to choose his men not just for their bravery but also for their state of alertness and caution. The selection was based on an act as mundane as the way they drank water from a river. Those who kneeled to drink directly with their mouths were disqualified, while those who scooped the water with their hands to their mouths, thereby keeping their heads up and eyes open, were chosen. This seemingly trivial criterion revealed a deep lesson on the importance of remaining vigilant and prepared, even in the most mundane tasks. The insistence on vigilance as a selection criterion goes beyond mere military prudence. It embodies a spiritual and moral lesson that resonates throughout the scriptures. On a practical level, the 300 chosen represented those capable of staying alert to danger, an indispensable quality for any defender of their community. However, on a spiritual level, this act symbolizes the constant vigilance that believers must exercise in their faith and daily lives. Gideon's story teaches that vigilance is essential not only for facing physical adversaries but also for combating spiritual complacency and conformism. Thus, the importance of vigilance, illustrated in the selection of the 300, highlights an eternal truth about the need to remain conscious, prepared, and steadfast in faith, ready to respond to God's call at any moment. Number 6. The symbolism of trumpets and jars. In the biblical context of Gideon's battle against the Midianites, the use of trumpets and jars carries a profound symbolism that transcends mere military tactic. Trumpets, in the Israelite tradition, were not just musical instruments. They were heralds of God's presence, used both in war and religious ceremonies to summon the people, announce festivities, and signal moments of divine importance. By sounding the trumpets at the crucial moment of battle, Gideon and his 300 men not only instilled fear in the hearts of their enemies but also proclaimed their faith in God as their true commander-in-chief. This act symbolized divine intervention and guidance in battle, reaffirming that victory depended on God's will rather than human strength. On the other hand, the clay jars, which concealed the lit torches until the opportune moment, symbolized the revelation of divine light, breaking the darkness of oppression. By breaking these jars, Gideon and his men not only surprised and confused the Midianite army but also demonstrated how the fragile human instruments, represented by the clay jars, can reveal the light and power of God when broken. This act carries the message that, through surrender and the breaking of the self before God, true divine power can be unleashed. Thus, the symbolism of the trumpets and jars in Gideon's battle teaches about the importance of faith, obedience, and humility before God, principles that lead to victory beyond human calculations and expectations. Number 5. The night before the attack. On the eve of one of the most unusual and strategic battles narrated in the Bible, the story of Gideon takes a providential and meaningful turn. The night before facing the vast Midianite army with just 300 men, Gideon receives a divine instruction that would mark Israel's destiny: to descend into the enemy camp. There, Gideon hears two Midianite soldiers discussing a dream one of them had, which symbolized their army's crushing defeat at the hands of Gideon and his tiny contingent. This event was not merely a coincidence. It was a divine manifestation intended to strengthen Gideon's and his men's faith and determination, showing that God was with them. This episode underscores a profound and central truth in the biblical narrative: the importance of faith and trust in divine providence over human logic and appearances. In a situation where fear and doubt would have been the most natural human responses, Gideon's experience highlights how divine intervention can transform uncertainty into conviction and fear into courage. This event not only set the stage for a miraculous victory but also served as a testimony of God's power, acting in favor of those who place their faith in Him, a lesson that transcends all generations and continues to inspire believers to trust in divine guidance and purpose, even in the most challenging circumstances. Number 4. The role of obedience. Obedience is one of the most prominent pillars in the biblical narrative of Gideon's battle, as recounted in chapters 6 and 7 of the book of Judges. In this story, Gideon, an unlikely leader chosen by God to liberate Israel from the Midianites, faces a seemingly insurmountable challenge. However, his success is not based on conventional military strategy or the number of his forces, but on his unwavering obedience to divine directives. The reduction of his army from 32,000 men to 300, by God's command, highlights a fundamental principle: victory depends more on faith and obedience to God than on human strength or power. This act of obedience is not just a demonstration of faith but also a reminder that, under divine guidance, God's plans transcend human logic. The importance of obedience in this account transcends mere submission to a divine command. It is a lesson on how faith in action can activate God's providence and power in situations that seem desperate. By obeying God, Gideon becomes a conduit through which divine purposes are manifested, offering a profound lesson on the interaction between human faith and divine sovereignty. Gideon's obedience, even when the instructions seemed contrary to all reason, reflects an absolute trust in God's wisdom and power, highlighting that true victory is achieved through surrender to divine will, rather than through self-reliance. This story teaches us that, in the divine economy, obedience is not just an act of submission, but also an act of faith that can trigger miracles and change the course of history. Number 3. Faith over logic. The story of Gideon, especially the drastic reduction of his army from 32,000 to 300 men under divine guidance, serves as a powerful reminder of a fundamental principle in biblical faith: the supremacy of faith over human logic. This episode, detailed in the book of Judges, chapters 6 and 7, not only challenges our understanding of military strategy but also underscores a deeper spiritual truth. The divine instruction to Gideon to decrease his army to such an insignificant number, compared to the vast Midianite army, seems to defy all logic. Yet, this act of obedience transforms what might be seen as a numerical disadvantage into a powerful demonstration of faith. The victory that follows is not just a military feat but an affirmation that, under the guidance and blessing of God, the impossible becomes possible. The reason for this focus on faith over logic lies at the heart of the relationship between God and His people. By reducing Gideon's forces, God sought to eliminate any doubt that the victory over the Midianites would be His doing, not due to human power or cunning. This act served to teach Israel a lesson in humility and total dependence on God, reminding them that their security and success did not depend on their strength or numbers, but on their faith and obedience to Him. Gideon's battle is an eternal testimony that true victory and liberation come from following the path God points out, no matter how illogical it may seem to human eyes. This account invites believers of all times to trust in God, even when the situation seems desperate, and to remember that, in God's kingdom, faith always has the last word over human logic. Number 2. The psychological strategy. In the remarkable biblical story of Gideon and his battle against the Midianites, psychological strategy plays a crucial role, showcasing ingenuity and divine guidance in desperate circumstances. By reducing his army from 32,000 to just 300 men, Gideon faced an overwhelming numerical disadvantage. However, following God's command, he implemented a tactic based more on cunning than on brute force. In the middle of the night, he divided his men into 3 companies, surrounded the enemy camp, and at a given signal, they blew trumpets, broke clay jars that concealed torches, and shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon." This unexpected action generated absolute chaos among the Midianites, who, confused and terrified by the sudden eruption and deafening noise, presumed they were facing a much larger army. This ingenious use of psychological warfare underscores the importance of perception and fear in armed conflict. Gideon's strategy exploited human fear of the unknown and the unexpected, magnifying the perception of his force exponentially. The induced confusion led the Midianites to attack each other, facilitating an Israeli victory with minimal casualties. This account not only highlights Gideon's cunning and faith in following divine instructions against all human logic but also teaches an eternal lesson on how wisdom and strategy can prevail over numerical strength. Ultimately, Gideon's battle illustrates how God's power can manifest in mysterious and surprising ways, ensuring victory against all odds. Number 1. The unusual selection method. In the biblical narrative of Gideon's battle, we find one of the most unique and divinely inspired episodes in the history of Israel's wars, depicted in Judges chapter 7. This chapter tells us how God instructed Gideon to reduce his army from 32,000 men to just 300, using a seemingly arbitrary but deeply symbolic selection method, the way the men drank water from a river. Those who scooped water with their hands and brought it to their mouths, as if they were lapping, were chosen, while those who bent down to drink directly with their mouths were excluded. This criterion, far from being a mere whim, was imbued with profound spiritual and practical significance, outlining not only the bravery and vigilance of the chosen but also Israel's absolute dependence on divine providence for victory. The reason for this unusual selection method goes beyond the military qualities of the men. It symbolizes the primacy of faith and obedience to God over human logic and numerical strength. By reducing the army to such an insignificant number against a vastly superior enemy, God wanted to teach Israel that victory does not depend on human might or strategy but on divine will. This act served as a test of faith for Gideon and his men, as well as a powerful demonstration that, in God's hands, what seems weak can become an unstoppable force. The victory that followed was a clear manifestation that when God directs the battle, even the smallest and seemingly inadequate army can triumph over overwhelming forces, leaving an eternal lesson of trust and dependence on divine power and guidance.